Chapter 15 of Martha by the Day. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Martha by the Day by Julie M. Lippmann. Chapter 15. Sam Slauson had gone to the Adirondacks in January, personally conducted by Mr. Blennerhassett, Mr. Ronald's secretary, Mr. Ronald, in the most unemotional and businesslike manner, having assumed all the responsibilities connected with the trip and Sam's stay at the sanatorium. It was Claire who told Mr. Ronald of the Slausons' difficulty, how Martha saw no way out and still was struggling gallantly on, trying single-handed to meet all obligations at home and, in addition, send her husband away. "That's too much, even for Martha," he observed. "If I only knew how to get Sam to the mountains," Claire said in a sort of desperation. "You have just paved the way." "How?" "You have told me." "You are going to help?" "Yes." "Oh, how beautiful!" "I am glad that, for once, I have the good fortune to please you." Claire's happy smile faded. She turned her face away, pretending to busy herself with Radcliffe's books. "I see I have offended once more." She hesitated a moment, then faced him squarely. "There can be no question of your either pleasing or offending me, Mr. Ronald. What you are doing for Martha makes me glad, of course, but that is only because I rejoice in any good that may come to her. I would not take it upon myself to praise you for doing a generous act, or to blame you if you didn't do it." "Crushed again," observed Francis Ronald gravely, but with a lurking, quizzical light of laughter in his eyes. For an instant Claire was inclined to be resentful. Then, her sense of humour coming to the rescue, she dropped her heroics and laughed out blithely. "How jolly it must be to have a lot of money, and be able to do all sorts of helpful, generous things," she said lightly. "You think money the universal solvent?" "I think the lack of it the universal insolvent." "I hope you don't lay too much emphasis on it." "Why?" "Because it might lead you to do violence to your better impulses, your higher instincts." "Why should a man think he has the right to say that sort of thing to a woman? Would you consider it a compliment if I suggested that your principles were hollow, negotiable, that they were for sale or to let, like an empty house?" "I suppose most men would tell you they have no use for principle in their business, only principal." "And you think women—" "Generally, women have both principle and interest in the business of life. That's why we look to them to keep up the moral standard. That's why we feel it to be unworthy of her when a girl makes a mercenary marriage." The indignant blood sprang to Claire's cheeks. What business had he to interfere in her affairs, to warn her against marrying Bob Van Brandt, assuming that if she did marry him it would be only for money? She was glad that Radcliffe bounded in just then, throwing himself upon her in his eagerness to tell her all that had befallen him during their long separation of 2 hours, when he'd been playing on the Mall under Beatrice's unwatchful eye. In spite of Martha, Claire had just been on the point of confessing to Mr. Ronald. He had seemed so friendly, so much less formidable than at any time since that first morning. But she must have been mistaken, for here were all the old barriers up in an instant, and with them the resentful fire in her heart. Perhaps it was the memory of this conversation that made her feel so ill at ease with Robert Van Brandt. She could not understand herself. Why should she feel so uncomfortable with her old friend? She could not help being aware that he cared for her, but why did the thought of his telling her so make her feel like a culprit? Why should he not tell her? Why should she not listen? One thing she felt she knew: if he did tell her, and she refused to listen, he would give it up. He would not persist. She remembered how, as a little girl, she had looked up to him reverentially as big Robbie Van Brandt. He was a hero to her in those days, until he had let himself be balked of what he had started out to get. If he'd only insisted, who knows, maybe. She was sure that if he offered her his love and she refused to accept it, he would not, like the nursery rhyme model, try again. He would give up and go away, and in her loneliness she did not want him to go away. Was she selfish? She wondered. Selfish or no, she could not bring herself to follow Martha's advice and let him get his proposal off in his chest. It was early in April before he managed to do it. She and Radcliffe had gone to the park. Radcliffe was frisking about in the warm sunshine while Claire watched him from a nearby bench, when suddenly Mr. Van Brandt dropped into the seat beside her. He did not approach his subject gradually. He plunged in, desperately, headlong, heartlong, seeming oblivious to everything and every one save her. When at last he left her, she, knowing it was for always, was sorely tempted to call him back. She did care for him in a way, and the life his love opened up to her would be very different from this. And yet... She closed her cold fingers about Radcliffe's little warm ones, and rose to lead him across the plaza. She did not wonder at his being so conveniently close at hand, nor at his unwonted silence all the way home. She had not realized until now that it was snapped, how much the link between this and her old home life had meant to her. It meant so much that tears were very near the surface all that day, and even at night, when Martha was holding forth to her brood, they were not altogether to be suppressed. "Easter comes early this year," Mrs. Slawson observed. "Am I going to have a new hat?" inquired Cora. "What for do you need a new hat? I should like to know. I suppose you think you'll walk up Fifth Avenue in the church parade, and folks'll stare at you and nudge each other and whisper, 'Look at there, that's Miss Cora Slawson that you read so much about in the papers, that one on the right-hand side, wearing the French chapeau with the white ribbon and the grand vinaigrette onto it. Ain't she handsome?' "I think you're real mean to make fun of me," pouted Cora. "I got $1.50 for the Easter singing," announced Sammy, "'cause I'm promoted, and I'm going to sing a solo." "Careful you don't get your head so turned you sing out at the other side of your mouth," cautioned Martha. "'Stead of crowing so much, you better make sure you know your colic." "What you going to do with your money?" inquired Francie, unable to conceive of possessing such vast riches. "I dunno. Come here and I'll tell you," said his mother. "Whisper." At first Sammy's face did not reveal any great amount of satisfaction at the words breathed into his ear, but after a moment it fairly glowed. "Ain't that grand?" asked Martha. Sammy beamed, then went off whistling. "He's going to invest it in a hat for Cora as a s'prise, me adding my mite to the fun, and not letting him be any the wiser. And Cora, she's going to get him a pair of shoes with her bank pennies, and be this and be that. The one thinks he's closing the other, and is proud as punch of it, while they're learning manners the same time they're being dressed," Martha explained to Claire later. "I wish you'd tell that to Radcliffe," Claire said. "He loves to hear about the children, and he can learn so much from listening to what is told of other kiddies' generosities and self-denials." Martha shook her head. "There's nothing worth telling," she said. "And besides, if I told him, he might go and tell his mother or his Uncle Frank, and they might think I was putting in a bid for a Easter egg on my own account. Radcliffe is a smart little fellow. He knows a thing or two, and sometimes three, and don't you forget it." That Radcliffe knew a thing or two, and sometimes three, he proved beyond a doubt to Martha next day, when, as she was busy cleaning his Uncle Frank's closet, he meandered up to her and casually observed, "Say, you know what I once told you about Miss Lang being Mr. Van Brandt's best girl?" "Yes." "Well, she ain't." "Why ain't she?" I was looking out of the window in my mother's sitting room yesterday morning, and when my mother and my Uncle Frank they came up from breakfast, they didn't see me 'cause I was back of the curtains. My mother said she had a letter Shaw he just gave her, and when she read it she clapped her hands together and laughed, and my Uncle Frank he said, "Why such joy?" And she said, "The greatest news! Amy Pelham is engaged to Mr. Van Brandt." And my Uncle Frank his face got all dark red at once, and he said to my mother, "Catherine, are you responsible for that?" And she said, "I never lifted a finger. I give you my word of honour, Frank." And then my Uncle Frank he looked better, and my mother she said, "You see, he couldn't have cared for Miss Lang after all. I mean, the way we thought." And he said, "Why not?" And she said, "'Cause if he'd asked her she would have taken him, for no poor little governess is going to throw away a chance like that. No sensible girl would say no to Bob Van Brandt with all his vantages. She'd jump at him, and you couldn't blame her." And then my mother and my Uncle Frank they jumped, for I came out from behind the curtains where I'd been looking out, and I said she would too say no. My Miss Lang she's sensible, and one time in the park when Mr. Van Brandt he asked her to take him and everything he had, that's what he said, "Take me and everything I have, and do what you want with me." Miss Lang she said, "No, Bob, I can't. I wish I could, for your sake, if you want me so, but I can't." And Mr. Van Brandt he felt so bad I was sorry. When I thought Miss Lang was his best girl I didn't like him, but I didn't want him to feel as bad as that. And he went off all alone by himself, and Miss Lang, only I couldn't tell any more, for my Uncle Frank he said real sharp, "That's enough, Radcliffe. But last night he brought me home a dandy boat I can sail on the lake, with a rigging and a centre board, and oh, lots of things. And so I guess he wasn't so very mad after all." End of chapter 15. Read by Sandra.